Hello. So we will go on today reading a few more Midrashim, the latest Midrashim that I guess have ever been written. Midrashim that were written by Israeli women after October 7th. So last meeting we read 3 Midrashim written by women from kibbutzim from the Gaza envelope. We read one Midrash from a woman from Kfar Aza, another one from a woman, a woman survivor from Nachal Oz, and we read a Midrash from a woman from Kibbutz Sa'ad. Kibbutz Sa'ad managed to protect itself thanks to the warnings they received from the kibbutzim that were already attacked and were responsible enough to warn the other kibbutzim that the terrorists are on their way. So those kibbutzim, those midrashim dealt with the pain, with the anger, and with the sense of losing a home and wandering from place to place. And they managed to express those feelings in that traditional language that maybe enable us to use these midrashim later on in the future history as the images, the memory of that destruction that we all pray that will not turn to be the third destruction. So today we will read another 3 midrashim that were not written by survivors from the Gaza envelope, but from other Israeli women that also seek to express themselves and are capable to express themselves in this traditional language of Midrash. The first Midrash that we will read was written by a Yerushalmi woman. Her name is Oshrat Shoham. Oshrat is a prosecutor here in Jerusalem of sex crime in kids. For many, many years, she's in charge of this. She wrote several midrashim on sexual harassment and abuse in the Bible. Fascinating midrashim. And we published them in the first volume of Dirshuni in English. And now she wrote a midrash on captive women in captivity, which is an issue that we can't stop thinking and worrying about for the last 300 and plus days. So maybe one more last introduction. She relates to a certain Mishnah on captivity and certain Talmudic sugya. We will read them first and I'll explain them, and then we'll see what she's doing with them. So, a warning. The first Mishnah is one that I personally, when I read it first, many years ago, couldn't believe my eyes. It has to do with the order of life savings, and let's see what the rabbis, or some of them, thought is the right order. So the name of the Midrash is Redeeming Captive Women, Oshrat Shoham, and the Mishnah from Horayot is, the man precedes the woman to rescue and to return a lost item. And the woman precedes the man in providing clothing and to get her out of captivity. At times when both stand to be ruined, the man precedes the woman. So it begins with the fact that the man precedes the woman to rescue. If you can rescue only one person, you have just one piece of rope, and a man and a woman are sinking, are drowning. You halachically should throw the rope to the man. Very, very difficult Mishnah for, I guess, most of us today. And to return a lost item, hashavat aveda. And the woman precedes the man in providing clothing, maybe it's tzniut, and to get her out of captivity. So it sounds, I don't know what's your rationality, but it sounds like we're worrying that the women will suffer there more from some reason, and that's why she's supposed to be redeemed first. But at times when both stand to be ruined sexually, when there is a sexual threat in captivity, the man precedes the woman, which is very, I don't know to say surprising, because both of them can suffer. I don't think, maybe the woman can get pregnant, which is another problem. But for me, it's horrible and painful to read this Mishnah and to ask, are we supposed to act these days like this? So what are the rationalities behind it? This is the first part, the first source that you will relate to. The second one is the Talmud in Baba Batra, talking about redeeming captives. Redeeming captives is a great mitzvah. Now many people in Israel wear these t-shirts with this saying, and there are many signs of it everywhere. Rabba said to Rabba Bar Mari, from whence the statement of the sages that redeeming captives is a great mitzvah? He said to him, as is written, and it shall come to pass when they say to you, where shall we go? And you will tell them, this is what God says, the one to death, and the one to the sword, and the one to famine, and the one to captivity. In Jeremiah, we know that Jeremiah was he was the prophet of the destruction. He talks about the different ways that people will suffer. And Rabbi Yochanan said, everything mentioned in this verse is harsher than the one that precedes it. The sword is harsher than death. Famine is harsher than the sword. Captivity is the harshest of them all, for it includes them all. So we may think that death is the worst thing because you can't be redeemed, but now we learn that captivity is actually such a torment that maybe death is, for some people, or in this concept, is better. When you are redeemed from captivity, you'll have to deal with the consequences all your life. So we have the statement here that redeeming the captives is such a big mitzvah. You should almost do anything to help them. And now Oshrat will relate to these texts, and we'll see what she's doing with this, especially, of course, with the question, how can it be that women are not, let's say that men are prior to women in saving, that gender has to do anything with the consideration of who to redeem first. Captivity is the harshest of all, for it includes them all. That is why they said, and the woman precedes the man in providing clothing and to get her out of captivity. Oshrat is thinking. And why does she have precedence over a man in getting out of captivity? Because captivity holds the threat of rape. And it's written of Sarah, and the Egyptians saw the woman was very beautiful, and they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to the house of Pharaoh. And taking is none other than for intercourse, as is written, and I took her to myself for a wife. And it is further said regarding Sarah and Avimelech, the king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. Could it be that she went of her own accord? Rather, he took by force, and not for her own good, as is written of Dinah, and he took her and lay with her and abused her. So Oshrat believe that the Mishnah in the first place prior the woman for taking her out of captivity, since it has to do with sexual abuse, and she brings the proofs from the Bible. We see that Sarah was taken to sexual harassment by those kings, the king of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, and the king of Gerar. She wasn't taken just to, I don't know, to get more money from her husband or his tribe. She was taken to be abused. That's why they take women. And also we know the story of Dinah that was taken by Shechem ben Hamor to be abused. We know she was abused. So you would think, or Oshrat think, that of course this is the reason to help the women first. Sarah was a beautiful woman because Avimelech took her by force during a time of peace. He didn't have the chance to rape her, for the Holy Blessed One said to him in a dream, "You will die for the woman that you took." And in the end, she was redeemed. But in time of war, it is said, "And when you see among the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire her, and you will take her for a wife. For in time of war, there is time for intercourse. And a man cannot withstand his desire to torture the woman captive and rape her, for there is no one to save her. And a man cannot withstand his hatred and seeks to abuse the captive woman, as is written, because you have abused her. That is why they said, and the woman precedes the man in providing clothing and to get her out of captivity." So first we'll explain this. She strengthened her claim that women should be redeemed first, and she explains to us that Sarah was the easiest case. Sarah was taken in days of peace, and Pharaoh didn't jump on her and raped her immediately. And that night, in his dream, God revealed to him and warned him that he shouldn't touch her. She belongs to someone else. But in time of war, which is our days, we know from the Bible that even we, the men that see a woman from the enemy's tribe that they want to take. So, of course, it's not totally immoral. They're supposed to take her to a wife and not just to abuse her and throw her or whatever. But they're allowed to take her because we know that it's more difficult to hold yourself in a war, or this is at least the concept here, because in war the desire is very strong and the hatred is very strong. And the quote here, there is a quote here, there is time for intercourse in sex. It's really a quote from the Talmud in Masechet Ketubot, in Ketubot tractate, that in a war, maybe this is a time, or at least the raping is during the war, is part of the war. And the Rashi explains there on the spot in Ketubot that the desires in a man in a war are abnormal, are more powerful, and it's very difficult to hold themselves. So there is a concept here that I'm not sure we are a part of it today, all the agreements that we signed, but there is an sort of understanding to the man nature. I don't know if you feel the same, that in the war the standards are different than in peace times. So Sarah was saved, but we are in a war. So what's going to happen to our women? And she look at towards the end. If so, why did our sages say, at times when both stand to be ruined, the man precedes the woman? Right? We saw that in the end of the Mishnah, of course, women should be redeemed first. from captivity, but in case there is sexual harassment involved, the men should be released first. How do you understand this? Why? Because, as Oshrat says, I understand captivity for women as sexual abuse. So, why? For ruin is none other than the ruin of a woman accused of adultery. As they said, one who sees an accused woman in her ruination, be it ruin that she herself did or that was brought upon her. So she mentions here a status that is called sota bekilkula, a woman that betrayed her husband and is being caught while doing this. Or there are different explanations for this status. What she's trying to take from this status of a woman is that sometimes sexually you are doing the fault, the wrongdoing, but sometimes it is done to you. So she's trying to move and to tell us that these people in captivity, the harassment is done to them. They're not a part of it. They're not cooperating. They shouldn't be blamed for it and judged for it. And she goes on, and more, like a ruiner who does an action not for its own sake and is having intercourse in order to disgrace and degrade. So the original Midrash in Hebrew mentions that in sex you can do the sex for the joy and or for fertility, but you can also do it to harm. And in this case, we're talking about melacha sheina tzricha legufa, activity that is not for the normal sake of it, results of it, but in an awkward way to get something else. This term melacha sheina tzricha legufa, doing some work that is not really for the normal results of it, is taken from the rulings of Shabbat, that we can't do 39 melachot, 39 acts on Shabbat, and there's a halachic questioning back and forth. What do you do when you do something from these 39 acts, but it's not for its own sake, but for something else? So she just took this expression from there to emphasize that the sex, as if in the ruin, the way she keep using, in war is not even for the sake of sex. It's really a part of hurting, of humiliating and hurting. She goes on, they said the man is more ashamed. So maybe the explanation for why men precede women when it has to do with sexual abuse is because their shame is bigger than women's. And she's trying to prove their concept, as is written of Lot, that the men of Sodom said to him, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us, and we will know them. Do you remember the story of Lot in Bereshit in Genesis? The three messengers came to Lot to warn him about the catastrophe that is going to fall upon Sodom and Gomorrah. And here we see that the bad people of Sodom come to Lot and ask him to give them the three messengers, male messengers, to rape them. And what did Lot do? He brought out his daughters to them. This is a proof that it's more horrible as if to abuse men than women, at least in Lot's mind. So he gave the crowd, the Hamon, the horrible people of Sodom, his daughters instead. As it's written, here I have two daughters who have not known a man. I will bring them out to you, and you can do with them whatever you see fit. Just do not do anything to these men, because this is why they came to the shade of my rafters. For Lot had been a captive in war and knew the pain of captivity and its ruin. So the concept that as if maybe is the rabbinic one is that, and she's trying to prove it through the story of Lot. We know that Lot himself was captive, and Abraham took his strong people and they went to redeem him a few chapters before in Genesis. So maybe from his memory he knows that it's unbearable to be used sexually in generally, but, so he refuses to let the messengers out of his house to the people, and he sends the girls. I'm going on reading. But the merciful one grieves for and has compassion on women and men as one, as is written, and the man held his hand and his wife's hand and his two daughters' hands out of God's compassion on him. And they took him out and placed him outside the city. So Oshrat moves the light a little bit further, and she shows that God actually doesn't behave like this. He cares the same for the men and the women in the family and pulls them all together from the city. And God gave neither man nor woman precedence over the other, but rather saved them all from their hands, as is written, and you will hear the heavens, the place where you abide, their prayers and their plead, and give them mercy before their captors, that they will have mercy on them. She quotes in Kings the verse that talks about God helping everyone, redeems everyone from their captors. And now Oshrat summarizes and brings her agenda or call or moral call for today. And she says, and so we too, in times of war and captivity and destruction, are commanded to work at redeeming captives, women and men, all the more, for captivity is the harshest of them all. So she's pulling out the gender element from the story and tells us, let's behave like God, that helped Sarah and is helping the girls of Lot and helps the people in the destruction, men and women together. And especially our days, that there are such conflicts, who to redeem from captivity in all these bargainings that we are trying to do with Hamas. Very, very big dilemma. And I guess each of us has to get a decision by themselves, but at least it's a way of thinking, critical perspective, that things won't be automatic, and we will ask ourselves, what are the parameters that should be involved? Ask again and again, do men really suffer more sexually? How can it be said? And just rethink about this whole dilemma once again. Maybe last thing about Oshrat's Midrash is that the Goldberg Polins daven in Oshrat's shul in Jerusalem. Oshrat actually established the shul. The name of the shul is Hakel. It's a mostly egalitarian minyan, most of the Shabbatot. And I'm sure it's very, very difficult to see their, not despair, thank God, but their pain, which is unbearable, to witness it. And she had to express her pain, Oshrat, from this. And she found this religious language, this traditional way to express pain and also criticism. of this in this moment. The next Midrash is a Midrash by Rivka Lubitch. We studied already a Midrash by her. She is the To'enet Rabbanit, the person who used to be To'enet Rabbanit, represent women in rabbinical courts. We read a Midrash of hers, and we will read on next time. She's a fantastic Midrash writer. And the Midrash that we're going to read now is not easy. So again, a sort of a warning. If you feel uncomfortable, it's totally normal. You can have your criticism yourself. And, Chazal, the rabbis, had different thoughts. They didn't think the same about anything. So Jewish women don't think about anything the same either. And we don't have to think the same. We're Jews. We just disagree about everything. So her Midrash is on a chapter of Psalm. It's not she's playing with the chapter of Psalm in a way that she didn't do before in any of her Midrashim. It's a unique way, an original way, and it's not easy theologically to read it. It's either a total heresy or the most religious Midrash you've ever seen. So you will decide for yourself. The background is that I was shocked when I received this Midrash from her. Actually, I burst into cry more than I had over any Midrash that I received the last year. I don't know why it touched me. God in us, I guess, is the last hope. It's the most vulnerable place in our hearts. So I cried for hours after I read it. I guess it was the last offense that I had dealing with these Midrashim. And she told me, I called her, of course, immediately, and she told me that when she went to shul, like many shuls during the last year, we go to shul and we read this a chapter from Psalm 121, a song of ascents, I will raise my eyes to the mountains, etc. So we read it in shul every Shabbos. The cantor is saying one verse and we all repeat. And it feels like the high holidays, like Yamim Noraim, that we all repeat verse after verse. I know many shuls all over the world read it on Shabbatot and some every day also. And she told me when in her shul, when they read it, she can't stand it. And while everyone says this, she said in her heart something else every Shabbos until she finally went home and one day in Motzei Shabbat she wrote down the version that she says in shul. And she told me that she is going to shul and she's saying the new version, and this is her religious moment and the way to deal with October 7th. So first I'll read the psalm that most of us know, and then I'll read her version. A song of ascents. I will raise my eyes to the mountains. From whence will my help come? My help is from God, maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. Your guardian will not slumber. Here, he neither sleeps nor slumber, the guardian of Israel. God guards you. God shades you at your right hand. By day, the sun will not strike at you, nor the moon by night. God will guard you from all harm. He will guard your life. God will guard your going and coming from now and forever. And this is the new version. A song of descents. I raised my eyes to the mountains, and my help did not come. I have no help from God, maker of heaven and earth. He let my foot slip. He let my guardian slumber. Here, He slept and slumbered, the guardian of Israel. God did not guard me. He did not shade me at my right hand. By day, the sun struck at me, and the moon by night. God did not guard me from all harm. He did not guard my life. How will God guard my going and coming from now and forever? So like I said before, it's either the end of the religious impulse, or it is the religious impulse. This is it when you want to understand reality and be honest with your theology. I would like to remind a sugya in Yoma tractate that I remembered I studied with David Hartman over 30 years ago, and left such an impression on me. The sugya there speaks about the formula that Moshe Rabbeinu invented for praying. Hashem Agadol Agibor V'Anora. God, the great, the strong, the mighty. And the sugya there tells us that after the first destruction, some of the prophets, Daniel and maybe Yirmiyah, I don't remember the second, stopped saying this formula, and actually not them, but other people, because they saw that God didn't save them, and maybe He can't, or what does it mean that He doesn't want? So they just couldn't praise Him the way they always did before. And Gemara tells us then later that there were rabbis that managed to say this formula, because what they did was a Midrash. They changed the meaning of what is to be Hagadol, Hagibor V'Anora, the great, the mightiest, big hero. They changed the meaning of it, and they said, oh, it doesn't mean that he's hero the way we mean it. It means that it could have been much worse, and some of us were left. That he did this to the goyim. So by doing a midrash, changing the plain meaning of the words of the formula and turning it to a new meaning, they kept saying the same formula. And the Talmud asks there, so how come the two prophets, Daniel and Yirmiyah, stopped saying this? They could have do this midrash and join the other rabbis and say the same words, but with the new meaning. How did they allow themselves to stop saying a formula that Moshe Rabbeinu taught us that this is the prayer? And the answer in the sugya there is that they believed in God so much, they knew the God in their truth, in the total truth of God, and the total truth in them, so they wouldn't lie about Him. Lo kizvu bo. And this is accepted in the Talmud as a way of being, of not praying. There are moments that to be honest with God and to believe in God is not to play by the plain book that we usually do, but to hold back for a second and be quiet or pray differently. And this is a religious act because you want to be honest with God. You still want to have a God in you, in your life. So this is Rivka's way of being religious in this period in time, this year. The last Midrash that we will read together was written by Yael Vurgan. Yael is my friend for many years, and I mentioned her before in the beginning of the last session we had. She is the Reform Rabbi of Sha'ar HaNegev, this a specific area in the Gaza envelope that includes several kibbutzim and moshavim. And Yael is the rabbi for the last 6 years, doing the tefillot, different ceremonies, bar mitzvot, burials, horrible burials since October 7th, burials of people burnt together and buried together. She went through, you can imagine, horrible period, maybe still, being a chaplain of, I don't know, thousands maybe, or at least hundreds of people. Nobody teaches you in rabbinical school how to be a chaplain for people who lost most of their families, who saw things that you yourself will never see. She told me once that she's a bereaved rabbi. She had to pull out of her cell phone endless congregants that died. So I asked her to write a Midrash herself to express where is she now. And she wrote this Midrash that we will learn now, that we will be the last one from the Midrashim that I brought that were written since October 7th. There are others too that God's willing will appear in the next volume of Dirshuni. And her Midrash I chose to read last because it ends with a note of hope and believe and trust in people that surprised me, and I wish I will be able to be influenced by that. So let's read slowly her Midrash. Yael Vurgan. It's named Midrash, One People to Another. Le'om mi le'om, one people to another. Yael said, all my days I grieved over this verse. And God said to her, it's to Rebecca, 2 nations are in your belly, and 2 peoples will go their separate ways from your bowels. And one people another will overpower, and the elder will serve the younger. So we know that Rebecca, Isaac's wife, had difficult pregnancy, and she went out lidrosh et Hashem. She seeked God. Lidrosh is also, of course, to do a midrash. And God explained to her that the pain is because she has twins, and the battle that is going on in her tummy will go on forever. These nations, that's the picture of the future. Horrible picture. And Yael says, and she uses a Talmudic expression that other rabbis say about other verses, that all her life she grieves over this verse. And she continues, and I asked, how did Rebecca hear this harsh prophecy while Isaiah heard this prophecy? No nation will take up a sword against another. Right? There's this beautiful prophecy that one day the utopian world where all struggles will resolve and there will be peace. So when you hear a prophecy, it's a question, how much of it depends on your personality, that you hear this and not that? Or is it really what God wanted you to hear? But she say there are different prophecies about us and our enemies. Why to hear the eternal battle and not the one that promises that there is hope and it doesn't have to be forever, the one of Isaiah? And she continues, and Abraham had already said to Lot, let there not be conflict between me and you, for we are brethren. So she says, even in Genesis, we already see that there are efforts to solve those issues between brothers, in the family, and to find other ways to live together, or if not together, to live, that everyone will live, to share this land in a certain way. And if you will say, all brothers hate one another, haven't we found that in every generation, after they hated, they came together and reconciled with one another? So she quotes here, all brothers hate one another. This appears in Tanchuma, in Midrash Tanchuma. There's a Midrash there that shows that all brothers, it tells us how they fought with each other, and it ends there in the traditional Midrash in Tanchuma that only Moses and Aaron managed. So now she will offer a different Midrash parallel to the Tanchuma, but she will offer a different way to see this relationship between the brothers. Of the sons of Abraham, it said, and they buried him, Isaac and Ishmael, his sons. So eventually, Isaac and Ishmael did do something together, did unite and manage to be biyachad, to be together. And of the sons of Isaac, it said, and Esau ran towards him and hugged him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. So in the tension there between Esau and Jacob, there was also a good ending. And of the sons of Jacob, it said, and now be not sad or angry with yourselves over having sold me. This Joseph tells his brother. Because it was to preserve life that God sent me here before you. So even there, after so many years of, horrible relationship, there is a good ending. So she's doing the opposite of that. Tanchuma Midrash, she sees that even in the Bible, all these brothers actually did unite in the end in a happy ending. Until there came a generation that hated no more. And she takes now Aaron and Moshe to even better place than in the original Midrash. And who are these? Moses and Aaron, of whom it said, how good and pleasing it is when siblings dwell together. But now, after she says that it doesn't have to be that hatred will be the thing that moves, that is the main, the fatal, future of us, she is this sharing with us her still pain. And I heard most of the people and the leaders of our days saying, we will live by the sword forever. And I grieved and wept even more that they prefer the bad prophecy that Rebecca heard over the good one that Isaiah told us. So she notices around her, wherever she goes, that people actually don't believe that there can be a resolution, that there can be ever in the future some kind of peace between us and the Palestinians or all our enemies. She sees that people are filled with despair and distrust and losing any positive perspective of our future. So let's see how she ends the Midrash after she sees this pain. Where is the happy note that I promised? Until a poem came into my hands. This poem that she's gonna quote, just 4 sentences from this poem, 4 lines, are from Chernichovsky's poem, very famous one named Ani Ma'amin, or we call it Sachki Sachki al Chalomot, Sachki Sachki al Chalomot. This is the Chernichovsky, Shaul Chernichovsky, that was a medical doctor in Europe and then moved to Israel and was a poet and a translator. In this poem, there is this stanza where he says, I will believe in the future too, even if it's far off today, but it will come. They will come bearing peace and then blessings, one people to another. What's interesting in this poem is that he is using the same expression, one people to another, that is le'om mile'om. This is the same expression that Rebecca heard, that when God says that they will fight in her stomach, he takes this expression and turns it to the blessing and the comfort and the belief that appears in Isaiah. He's like mixing them, but turning the bad words from Rebecca's prophecy to a good one. And he says, no, there will be between these two blessing and peace one day. And so Yael summarizes and ends her Midrash by saying, and I rejoice, a great joy, that Chernichovsky had come and turned the first prophecy upside down and made it like the second, better one. And I too chose to believe in it with all my heart and all my might. And I would go about in the city and call out and shout, the two nations can live on this land in peace, share its blessings, and be a blessing to one another. It's a wonderful, wonderful act of belief, a leap of belief, maybe, especially these days, that Israel is in the most, one of its biggest threats. But like Yael is saying, she chooses to believe. It may not come natural, but she see choosing the prophecy to believe as, I guess, a religious act. You have to choose rationally or in an artificial way, to choose to believe in the possibility of peace, of good, of believing in people, something that so many of us feel that we lost after October 7th. And I pray for all of us that we may be able to rebuild this belief in us at some point, someday, in order to have a taste to our lives and to our religious lives that believe in good. So thank you. And the next time we meet, we will read a few more Midrashim by women that has to do with ending and a new beginning for this new beginning of the year. Thank you.